15 seconds. Here comes Mitchell. Go Bear! Utah takes the lead.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. This is episode 64, and it's an emergency-ish episode of Basketball in the Mountains. We're coming to you live 24 hours or so after the big, wild day of trades in the NBA. Well, we're actually getting another wild day of trades in the NBA here today on Wednesday. Still, I think we're under less than 24 hours away from the NBA trade deadline at this point, which is on Thursday afternoon. But I kind of had to eat my words because on the other day on the podcast I was talking about we'll talk some trade deadline on on the podcast later this week and maybe early next week. I wasn't really expecting any kind of big news. Maybe the Nuggets shedding some salary, or Phoenix, they're kind of not really in a position to do anything. And I said at the end, I don't really expect anything of significance from Utah. Maybe aside from trading like Yusuf Nurkic to a contender or something like that. But wow, did we get a stunner yesterday here in the Mountain Time Zone with the Utah Jazz acquiring Memphis star, two-time All-Star, one-time Defensive Player of the Year, Jaren Jackson Jr. kind of going all in. There are a bunch of different players in this trade going in and out, 3 first-round picks from Utah to Memphis. It is just a wild, unexpected all-in move from the Angels and the entire front office in Utah. And here to break it down with us is our good friend Chandler Holt from KSL Sports. Chandler, how you doing? And what's kind of been the last 24 hours like for you in Salt Lake City as this is kind of getting back to what we remember with the Jazz and kind of going back to being competitive and being all in here?
Yeah, it was crazy. I actually was sitting at my desk right here. I think I was watching YouTube videos or something random, and I see a Teams chat. I was like, can we get a push for the big Jazz trade? And I was like, big Jazz trade? What do you mean? So I ring up Shams Charania's X account, and I see it, and I immediately got an article up, and then I ran in, did an emergency podcast, Jazz Notes podcast. Absolutely crazy. There are a million angles to talk about with this trade. I will just say flat out, I love the deal for 90% of the reasons. There are some things to be figured out, as are with any big trade in the NBA. But no, I was shocked, and I am really excited for the future of this team.
Breaking news on the podcast here, Chandler. I just got this in from Shams Charania. The Jazz have acquired Lonzo Ball and 2 second-round picks from the Cavs. Looks like it's mostly a salary dump, and that the Jazz are expected to maybe work on a buyout with Lonzo. But breaking news on the podcast while we're recording this here. So the Jazz got 2 second-round picks for likely taking on Lonzo Ball's contract. But that's not really relevant to this discussion here today. But like you said, here's the full trade for Jaren Jackson Jr. The Jazz get in, obviously, Triple J, John Conchar, Jock Landale, and Vince Williams Jr. from Memphis. They give up Walter Clayton Jr., Kyle Anderson, Taylor Hendricks, George Niang, and 3 future first-round picks, which will be Utah's own unprotected 2027 first-round pick, a future Lakers pick. I think that is next year.
Next year as well.
Yeah, Lakers unprotected pick next year, and then the 2031 Suns pick, which the Jazz really smartly acquired a couple years ago when the Suns were kind of in their kind of go for broke mode. They gave up their 2031 unprotected first to the Jazz for like 3 medium-ish decent first, which they end up using to acquire different guys. More breaking news: the Jock Landale just got sent to the Atlanta Hawks. When things are happening as we're talking here, so Jock Landale is not going to be a part of the core. But I still think it's interesting. We'll talk about the other guys that seem like they still are going to be in Utah at some point. Things are really happening. I'm glad we're recording this when we are, but This Jaren Jackson Jr. trade is a big swing for Utah. Like, it is not all of their picks in any regards, in any means. Like, I think Andy Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune was tweeting, I guess, that they still have 7 picks, future picks. So this is. But you're acquiring a guy who makes $50 million a year and is under contract for the next couple of seasons. So this is kind of, and obviously Keyonte George is going to be extension eligible this summer. He's going to get paid. So the Jazz, at least from a cap sheet, are going to be a little bit not maxed out, but they're going to be filling up their books this summer and kind of going forward. So this is kind of the guy they're going forward. And like I said, they're going to have chances to add ancillary pieces to this roster in the coming years. But what do you make of the fit here? Because it feels like, the core going forward for the Utah Jazz at least from bare minimum, these 5 guys. We'll see what comes in the draft this year if they keep their pick and all that kind of stuff. But Keyonte George, Ace Bailey, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Walker Kessler. That seems like right now it would be like the starting 5 going into next season with, like I said, barring any kind of draft pick coming in next year. How exciting of a prospect is that for you? Because to me, that just kind of makes me, I really like the fit. We could talk about all the reasons why, but just kind of, what is your gut reaction to hearing to that kind of 5-man group that Utah has to build around now?
First of all, absolutely massive starting 5. You have Ace Bailey at 6'10", maybe at your 2 guard. Lauri Markkanen,
George, who's like
Jaren
a
Jackson,
6'3", is like, but he's got long arms as well. He's kind of, it's a very massive starting 5. Yes.
But I like it a lot. And I will say, first of all, a lot of people are like, what does this mean for Walker Kessler? Right after, if anything, this gives Walker Kessler and his camp more leverage against the Jazz because Jaren Jackson, don't get me wrong, he can play the 5. He can, but his defensive player of the year in 2023, he had Steven Adams as his center and he was a roamer. And that's what you want from him. That is when he's at his best. This gives Walker Kessler and his camp more leverage to be like, hey, you guys need me now more than ever. And you talked about the salary. That's an angle I want to hit on in a second, but we'll stay on fit for now. Awesome. Like the Jazz we talked about before, the Jazz will score 130 points, but they'll let up 140. That's why they're a 16-win team right now. That's not going to be the case. A big part of that already is because Walker Kessler is out for the year. Right. You've been relying on Jusuf Nurkic, who, don't get me wrong, has been
he's
ridiculous.
The only true center on the roster. Yeah.
Yeah. He's been awesome this year, but also other than being the second biggest player in the NBA, he is like an absolute negative defensively. So you get Walker Kessler back. You add, Triple J to come in, be a roamer at the 4. And don't get me wrong, Lauri is not a good defender, but I have hope for Keyonte and Ace to eventually build up on that end, at least a little bit, especially Ace Bailey. I think it's an absolutely awesome fit. You're adding a 20-point per game scorer, and also with Lauri and Key, and maybe Ace takes a jump in the next coming years. Triple J doesn't really have a big offensive load. He can be relied on to get his points within the flow of the offense. He can shoot, which is awesome. I also think 2 things led to this Triple J deal. First of all, this deal does not happen without Keyonte George making a jump. Keyonte George, his performance this year has cleared the smoke for the Jazz front office, and that's obvious by making this deal when you're a 16-win team currently, right? And then also, I think Jusuf Nurkic being so awesome, he had 3 triple-doubles in 3 straight games. After being a absolute, people were paying to get off of him less than 365 days ago. I think the Jazz saw with a sort of running through a big man hub of an offense kind of guy. And I'm not saying Jaren Jackson is Nikola Jokic, but he can do that. He's sort of a guard in a big's body in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It sort of showed we like that a lot. And I think Jaren Jackson is absolutely, him and Bam Adebayo are the only people that really fit this kind of mold the Jazz were looking for. And even then, Jaren fits so much better next to Lauri and Walker in the front court.
Yeah, I love the fit with him and Lauri, and kind of moving Lauri to the 3. He's, like you said, he's not going to be a plus defender at the 3 really, or the 4. But I think allowing Jaren to kind of take whoever the big kind of forward is, kind of that assignment, and be that roamer, like you said too. I think all of that is going to be super helpful for the Jazz defense, which we talked about before, is really been really bad all season. And it comes with being a really young team and things in that nature. But I think you're spot on with the Keyonte George point, is that this does not happen without the Keyonte George leap and him becoming a clear guy for Utah to build around, because that was the big question mark going into this season, was what is the Utah Jazz's backcourt going to look like in the next 3 or 4 years? Who of these guys is going to emerge? We don't know if it's going to be Isaiah Collier. Obviously, Walter Clayton was a guy that drafted and had high hopes for, but he's a part of this trade now. But and I think the Walter Clayton loss is it doesn't really, you don't feel too bad about it given how good Keyonte has been this season. So I just think it's a really exciting core. At least the 4 guys. Ace Bailey, I still think there is a lot up in the air of what his future is going to be. I think he's had a generally pretty encouraging rookie season. in the context of this rookie class, it feels not that great because of the 4 guys that got picked ahead of him that the Jazz obviously missed out on. They're all having like historically good rookie seasons. The top 4, Dylan Harper, not as much as like Flag, Edgecombe, and Knipple, who have just been awesome. Like all 3 of those guys would have run away with Rookie of the Year last year. But I think Ace in general is having a solid rookie season. But I think the 4 guys you're really, really excited for just the immediate future for the Jazz is Keyonte, Lauri, Jaren Jackson Jr., Walker Kessler next season, because when just Keyonte, Lauri, and Walker Kessler were on the floor earlier this season for like 2 weeks before Walker Kessler got hurt, the Jazz were a really good team. Like they were a net positive team with all 3 of those guys on the court. So I think just adding Triple J to this is really awesome. Like I'm going to be honest, like Jaren Jackson Jr. has not had a great season, like especially offensively. Some of his numbers have dipped, but I think that's just kind of been with like a weird year. I'm willing to write it off as like a weird Memphis year overall with all of the John Morant stuff, him being in and out of the lineup. They've got a first-year head coach trying to work in this new system that maybe doesn't fit Jaren Jackson Jr. as much. But I think, like you said, with him being kind of like basically the third option offensively outside of Keyonte and Lauri, I think that's a really good fit for him where he's a plus upper 30s 3-point shooter. I think he's proven that to be like a 36-37% guy, and that's kind of exactly what you're looking for out of that 4 spot. So I just think it's a super exciting move, and I'm not too worried about the draft capital as much. Like we can talk about this year, just kind of the maneuvering the Jazz are going to have to do here in the last couple of months to kind of be where they are to keep their pick, because if you look at it right now, they have the 6th best or 6th worst record in the NBA, 6th best odds to get the number 1 pick. And right now, if they stay in that 6th spot, which I think they're like 2 games back, quote unquote, of like the Wizards and the Nets, who are 4-5, and like 2 or 3 games up on the Mavericks, who are in the 7th spot. If the Jazz stay in that 6th spot right now, they have like a 96% chance of keeping the pick, because obviously it's top 8 protected. So I think you just kind of want to, however you need to do it, stay in that 6th spot to keep this pick, because I don't know if they jump up. I don't know. Teams have been rewarded for being I've been rewarded for being not rewarded. It's not the NBA rigging this, but it's kind of worked out the last couple of years where teams in that 5 to 6, 7, 8, 9 range have jumped up in the draft. And I don't know if I'm having a vision here of just the Jazz jumping up on lottery night, getting Darren Peterson, and then now your starting 5 is Keyonte George, Darren Peterson, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Walker Kessler with like 6-man Ace Bailey. And I'm like, wow, that's really intriguing. I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but it just feels like there are endless possibilities here for the Jazz to have quickly exited this rebuild mode and back into at least being a really, really fun team in the West, bare minimum.
I want to add 2 things really quick, and I want to talk about the rest of this year for the Jazz. But quickly, Jaren Jackson Jr. is 26 years old, and before this trade, there was a question like a big reason why Lauri Markkanen was in a lot of trade rumors was because, mind you, the Jazz have never shopped Lauri Markkanen. That has never been a thing. There has been interest for him. Absolutely.
Yeah, the Warriors thing was real, 2 summers ago, where the Warriors were, but they would have had to give up basically everything they had to give up Lauri for the Jazz to even consider it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. But Lauri Markkanen, and as I was saying, the reason that was a conversation is because Lauri's 28 years old, and then you have a bunch of guys who are like 22 and younger. Yes. Now you add Jaren Jackson, who's 26, and that bridges the gap perfectly between the sort of 2 timelines, I guess you could say, that the Jazz have with their best players. For the rest of this season, if you're a Jazz fan watching this, if you're an outsider just wanting to get more information, the Jazz are going to do everything in their power to keep their pick for the rest of this year. I promise you. Jaren Jackson's going to come. There's going to be a week where there's elevation adjustment, and then he's going to strain his hamstring with 20 games left, and then
he's going to have altitude sickness for a week.
Yes. Yeah. I would place the over under on games this season where we see Keyonte, Lauri, and Triple J at like 4.5. Like we're not going to see those 3. There will be some of them, so to like sort of get a feel for it and also build up some hype for the fans here. But you're not going to see a lot of it. I promise you. I think at the very least, the Jazz are going to stay where they are currently, if not have a lot of injuries and end up sliding down even further into the reverse standings, I guess you could say.
Yeah, we'll see what we'll see what happens with Washington and Brooklyn. Brooklyn, I don't think the Jazz are going to catch them in the reverse standings, but Washington, we'll see whatever happens with the Trae Young thing. Maybe he'll never play for the Wizards. I don't know. He got acquired. He got acquired a couple weeks ago, and it still hasn't played. We'll see the Anthony Davis thing. They might just tell him to go home for the rest of the year. We'll see what all happens with the I still think the Jazz are going to be in a good position, though, to at least keep their spot. The main teams you got to worry about are probably like Dallas and the Bucks and the Grizzlies, who are right behind them in the reverse standings to keep that spot. But the Jazz have a decent cushion, even despite last night. I haven't mentioned the wild win the Jazz had last night in Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
131 to 122, where the Jazz played 7 guys because of the just guys that were out. Like Keyonte George has the sprained left ankle he's been dealing with. He's obviously out. Kevin Love was sick and didn't play. Yusuf Nurkic didn't play. So the Jazz are limited just like 7 guys. Isaiah Collier played all 48 minutes and
all 48
had 17 points and 22 assists, which is just like it's some of the wildest stats I've ever seen. I think Kyle Filipowski had a 16 and 14. Cody Williams played like 40 minutes. Ace Bailey played 40 minutes. Like it was just a wild game in the league that kind of went unnoticed. But I want to talk about the other guys that are coming in this trade as well. Obviously, we just found out that Jock Landale is being rerouted to the Hawks, but John Conchar and Vince Williams Jr. I think are interesting players. Like I don't think they're just throw-ins, especially Vince Williams Jr. I think both these guys kind of fit the mold of what the Jazz need going forward, because I think the Jazz are kind of well spoken for offensively for the next with what they have with this core, and that's not even counting in Ace Bailey and Isaiah Collier coming off the bench. They just kind of need glue guys that are willing to kind of muck it up and do the dirty work surrounding these really, really good offensive players that they've now accumulated. And I think John Conchar and Vince Williams Jr. kind of both fit that mold. That's kind of been their MO, and Memphis has just kind of been grit guys that kind of do their best with their athleticism. Try to compete defensively. Do either of those guys intrigue you one over the other? Just kind of what do you think about the Jazz also bringing those two guys in?
Let me first say, and I'll just get this out of the way, I like Jock Landale coming to Utah a lot yesterday. I thought that he's not nearly as good a passer. Yeah, he's not nearly as good a passer as Yusuf Nurkic, but I sort of saw him as like, oh, maybe he's the like Yusuf Nurkic like replacement in the coming years. Guess not. Of the other two guys, I like Vince Williams a lot. I think just coming in as a defensive minded guy, like he was like, I think the 47th overall pick in the second round, something like that. And he sort of made his way
guy
as
to
a
VCU,
defensive, grit guy. I don't imagine John Conchar gets many minutes. Like maybe he steps in as like a George Niang sort of this year for the Jazz, if he was healthy, of course, like spot minutes whenever you don't like what Bryce Sensabaugh is giving you, for example. But I like Vince Williams a lot. I think he will actually get some burn for the Jazz, and I think just adding a defensive-minded guy, because other than maybe Cody Williams, I don't think the Jazz had a single guy who's like, oh, this is our defense guy. You know, this is the guy we bring in to really focus on that end. So.
Yeah, I think it's. I want to talk about Cody Williams because I think this trade is big news for Cody Williams, and could be big things. Could be big stuff for his future. Vince Williams is super interesting. He's not overly a huge player. He's 6'4", 205 pounds, but he's, like I said, he's a guy at a VCU. All 40 years now in the league, he's averaged 10 plus points per game per 36 on decent efficiency. He's not a great 3-point shooter. Like I think his best year of his career was 2 years ago when he shot like 38% from 3 and averaged like 13 or so, or he averaged 10 points per game, but it was like 13 per 36. And this year he's similar, numbers per 36, but he's shooting just around 30% from 3. But you're just looking for him to be an athletic kind of defense first kind of guy to fit in around Keyonte in the backcourt when he's out there. And just to kind of spell Lauri and Keyonte for all the workload they have on the offensive end. Like I think it's a decent flyer for the Jazz, but kind of looking at the roster as a whole now for Utah, like this is going to be really interesting to see like who else the Jazz are going to prioritize going forward. Like we mentioned, like I think that 5-man group I mentioned with Keyonte, Ace, Lauri, Triple J, and Walker Kessler, that's pretty set in stone. That's like they're 5 core guys right now that they're going to build around. But then you've got like your Isaiah Colliers, your Bryce Sensabaugh, your Cody Williams, and now you add Vince Williams Jr. into that. Like I think this is just going to be like an open audition for like who wants to play the right way and who wants to be a part of this team going forward, because there is like, you still need guys to fill out your rotation. They're going to be willing to play hard and fill a role, because that's kind of what the Jazz are going to be looking for going forward, unless they, like I said, land like a Darren Peterson or Keaton Wagler, who I really, really like, is a freshman at Illinois who could be a nice guy for the Jazz if they don't get a top 3 pick. But regardless, there's open competition now up and down the Jazz roster, I think.
First of all, I am very excited to see Will Hardy try to win basketball games, and maybe for the first time in his coaching career. I think Will Hardy is an amazing coach.
I was
I'm
gonna say
excited
there
to
might
see
be
what he can do.
nobody more happy about this news than Will Hardy because he's been
Yes.
through it, man, with his first couple years in Utah, and I think everybody in Utah knows it. I know it here, and I've been a big fan of Will Hardy. Like I think a lot of people around the league know too. Will Hardy is a really, really good coach, and I think he's going to finally get a chance to show that on a much bigger scale next season.
Yes. Really quick, I said this earlier. I want to talk about the contract situation. Mind you, I am far from an expert on cap space and the whole payroll stuff. It is a goal of mine this offseason actually to get more versed with that.
You're way
But
more
it's
of an expert already than I am, so you feel free.
Like when looking at Walker Kessler and Keyonte George are the two sort of things to look out for here. Walker Kessler has to get paid this offseason. He's a restricted free agent.
Yes.
I think $20 million would be a great deal on the Jazz's side. I expect more towards 25, and I would expect his camp wants more than that. So we will see where it ends up landing. But let's just say 25 for the sake of conversation. Fair. You have Lauri at 46 this year and next year. Triple J comes in at 35 now, 49 next year.
His extension kicks in that he signed in Memphis a couple years ago, kicks in next year.
Yeah, and then you have Walker at 25. And then I'm assuming the Jazz do the same thing with Keyonte they did with Walker, which is for the sake of their own ability for to make trades, make deals, make extensions, etc. They're going to wait a year until he is also heading into restricted free agency. Because mind you, if they sign Walker Kessler, I also don't think they can make this deal with the Grizzlies. So it's sort of like hopefully they point to Walker like, dude, you may be upset, but this is why we did this. Yeah. But then assuming this is not a fluky season from Keyonte George, that's like a 30 million point guard. I don't know. I think Keyonte is 30 or more, 30 to 35 maybe.
Yeah.
And then it's
definitely.
like, okay.
If he shows this again next year, absolutely 100%.
Yeah. Keyonte, Lauri, Triple J, and Walker, don't get me wrong, that is an awesome core, and I think you're going to be a top 8 seed next year, and then maybe as you get some more years under your belt together and sort of build a chemistry, top 6 in the West, maybe. I still don't think that's a hardcore contending group right there. But then with all of those contracts, you might be maxed out. So it is an interesting thing to keep your eye on here for the Jazz, because you mentioned open audition. I do think whoever plays the right way is going to get minutes, but also I think the Jazz could benefit a lot from perimeter defense. Not trying to steal your guy, but I think a Peyton Watson mold of player would be really good for the Jazz. And like, I guess you could even sort of say Vince Williams is sort of like a budget version of that, just sort of a guard who has like defense as his main thing, glue guy. We will see. I think the Jazz, this is a massive jump for them. I don't think it moves them into contention even in a couple of years. But the contract situation is a little bit sticky.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because Lauri got his big extension that kicked in this year. Jaren's kicks in next year, and those two guys together are going to make $95 million next season. And like you said, Walker Kessler is not going to be cheap. Like you said, they'll probably wait a year for Keyonte just from a flexibility standpoint. But that's going to cost you more a year after that. If he has another year like this, he's just going to get more and more expensive. The cap's going to keep jumping up, every year. True. I think, you have Jordan Clarkson's dead money is coming off the books. Like there's going to be some ways to get around this, but I think there's just a bunch of guys in that range of like that if they've loaded up from first round picks or, second round picks that they've signed to deals, whether it is like John Conchard, Cody Williams, all the way down to Vince Jr. That's like all those guys are in like a $2 million to like $6 million range, which will be interesting. And they're going to need production from those guys, like you said, with kind of being maxed out from those four. And like even Ace Bailey is a guy that's making close to $10 million a year on his rookie deal. So the Jazz are going to, I think the Jazz, one of the things that they have done in recent years is done a good job of finding budget guys and getting production out of them. You mentioned Yusuf Nurkic this year, just like a role playing, he makes like $19 million this year. He's a free agent in the offseason, but like finding guys like that you can acquire that other teams don't want to kind of get the most out of the role players, because that's what this is going to be about with them going to be committing so much money to that top four in the coming years, like you said.
One more thing I want to add. I think the 3 first round picks that they sent out were the best case scenario for the Jazz for picks to send out. Mind you, Next year, it is the best of with all the picks from the Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. So it will be Memphis will be getting the best of either Cleveland, Minnesota, or Utah. And Cleveland is looking a little bit sticky. Their whole situation.
I still don't think that's going to be. I still don't think that's going to be a lottery pick, to be honest. Like,
agreed.
At worst, it's late lottery, I think.
Yes. But the best thing about that is after next year, and mind you, with this trade, the Jazz are clearly at least going for it next year. Like they will be a playoff team in all likelihood next year. And then after that, it's in the past. Like the Phoenix Suns pick hurts a little bit, but that wasn't yours in the first place. Like that could end up being a good pick.
That was kind of found money anyway. Yeah,
exactly. You traded 3 like bad first round picks for that, anyways.
Yes.
So I think it was best case scenario. After next year, you sort of wash your hands of the deal and you have an all defensive player on your team, which you couldn't say a year ago.
Yeah. I think that pairing with Walker and Jaren Jackson Jr. is really, really good from a defensive standpoint. I think it masks a lot of concerns you have with Keyonte and Lauri as defensive guy too. And I don't know, maybe it is like Cody Williams, who's, like we said, has played well lately. Maybe he is he's that fifth starter, just kind of that glue guy that kind of mucks it up. Because Cody, I've always thought of him as like a defense first kind of guy that, hey, I'll shoot the ball if it comes to me, but mostly I'm going to be a slasher, transition kind of guy. And then kind of take on top assignments defensively on the perimeter at the other end. So I just think it's a really, really fascinating move from the Jazz, and one that I did not see coming. So it'll be interesting to see. We still got 20 hours or so, or 21 hours or so until the trade deadline hits here. And like I said, we had some breaking news on the podcast earlier, which looks like it's going to be a 3-team trade here with the Jazz sending Jock Landale to Atlanta, getting 2 seconds for that. Or I think they get 2 seconds from Cleveland, and they're going to take on Lonzo Ball's salary, and they're going to expect it to waive him so he can go be a free agent. So Jazz basically shedding Jock Landale, bringing in Lonzo, getting a couple seconds for that. And now they're going to have this kind of mismatch of guys. Like you said, it'll be interesting to see who's in and out of the lineup on a given night. Last night, Lauri played 27 minutes. I think that was pretty interesting that he only played 27 minutes when they only had 7 guys to play. Like, I think everybody played 30 or more minutes besides him and Steve McKigley. So just a really, really fascinating all-in move from Utah. And I think like you, I kind of agree that like this doesn't instantly vault them into contender status. Like I think you're going to need another leap from Keyonte George, but I think it's more in the mold of like we feel like we've got a couple guys that are high level players. Maybe none of them are like all NBA guys. Like maybe in an off year, like I think obviously Lauri and Triple J have been all stars. I think Keyonte could be an all star if he continues his pace, but like none of them are like top 10 players in the NBA kind of guys. Mm-hmm. I think the Jazz are thinking, well, maybe we'll go this route of like, what if we have 4 top 50 players and then maybe we'll see what we get in the draft. And I think it's a really interesting bet for Utah in a Western Conference that is loaded up on star power, not just now, but for the future as well with Victor Wembanyama, and we'll see where Giannis lands and all that kind of stuff. It's not just one of those things where you can just like punt for a couple years in the West. Like the West is going to be difficult, has always been difficult. It's going to remain difficult, and it's going to take bold moves like this to kind of make a leap up. And that's why I think it's just so interesting, the timing for the Jazz as well.
Yeah, I want to add one last thing if we're starting to close here. A lot of people from the outside perspective of this Jazz deal, you look at it as, okay, a team with 16 wins now adds a non-top 25 player. Jaren's probably realistically somewhere between 26 and 40.
I think that's fair.
How does this make them, like, how is this a needle mover? Everyone should know that the Jazz have realized, probably for the first time really in franchise history, that the draft is the way that they need to go as a non-big free agency destination. So, but it's hard because, especially in previous years, they didn't have as bad of a team as a Washington or a Brooklyn or someone else. So their foot has not been on the gas. Like, especially Lauri Markkanen, he has had a leash on him. Like, that was seen most last year. Lauri Markkanen was still a 28 point per guy last year. He just didn't really have the full green light. So now you have all these guys, and the leash is going to be off next year, and you're adding a defensive stalwart, which is what the Jazz needed most. I think very exciting times in Salt Lake City.
I think one last thing I want to mention is I think the Lauri Markkanen example is something that I think should give a lot of encouragement for what the Jazz can get out of Jaren Jackson Jr. Because what was Lauri Markkanen when the Jazz got him? Kind of an afterthought, like a throw in, like a former, like he was just kind of a rotation guy as a former top 10 pick, a guy that had a lot of potential coming out of Arizona, and he just never materialized wherever, his various first stops, whether that was in Chicago or Cleveland. And then when the Jazz got him in the Donovan Mitchell trade, that wasn't the picks were what the big thing the Jazz were acquiring.
Yes.
Lauri Markkanen turning into this is a credit, not just to Lauri, but the coaching staff, the development, and the Jazz kind of buying low on him. And I think there's a similarity with Jaren Jackson Jr. where he's not at a similar spot in his career where Lauri was, where he was kind of just a rotation guy and just a guy trying to fit in. Whereas Jaren has been, like I said, defensive player of the year, 2-time All-Star already, but is having a down year. And people have always thought there's untapped potential with Jaren to become a top 15, top 10 player. And I think if there's an organization that you feel like could get the best out of that, barring Jaren is willing to kind of buy into whatever Will Hardy and the coaching staff have in mind for him, and same for the front office, I think this is the perfect environment for him to do so.
Agreed. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I am too. I was, like I said, I was just sitting at my computer yesterday. Also, like you, just trying to get some work done. See the push notification from Shams come up, and I'm like, wow, I was just like blown away. Just did not see this coming. I thought the Grizzlies were maybe just going to dump John Morant in some fashion to see what they could get for him, but maybe reassess Jaren Jackson Jr. in the summer. But Jazz are obviously aggressive in getting this done now, and I think it's really I think it says a lot for what they think they've got going forward. And these next 2 months are going to be interesting to see how they navigate.
Yes,
as you said multiple times now, navigate the standings and all that. But I think they're in a good spot to. I think, like I said, just stay in that 6th spot, and then you have like that 96% chance of keeping your pick. And if it falls to 9, then you just kind of got to put your hands up and say, it wasn't. We've always had that lottery luck kind of thing. But anyway, Chandler, I appreciate you hopping on today to break this on short notice, to kind of break this trade down, because it wasn't really expected. I wasn't sure when we were going to be talking Jazz again on this podcast, but here. I'm sure we'll be talking about them plenty. Getting closer to the end of the season and closer to draft time as well, because the Jazz are quickly one of the more interesting teams to watch in the NBA.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, and best of luck to your Seahawks this week in the Super Bowl, because
I was about to say I had to rep up today.
Yeah, I know you're a Seattle sports guy. I love the city of Seattle all around, and if my Eagles could not be in the Super Bowl, and they're playing the Patriots, and I don't like the Patriots, so go Seattle, go Seahawks. So appreciate you hopping on again, Chandler.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, that'll do it for this episode of Basketball in the Mountains. Thanks again to Chandler Holt from KSL Sports for coming on the show today. Make sure to follow him at C-Hole Sports on X. Listen to him on the Jazz Notes podcast with KSL for more complete coverage of this, and we'll be having more college hoops talk on the show. A little bit of a third episode this week, an additional episode because of the traded line and because of this big Jaren Jackson Jr. trade that is so fascinating. So appreciate everybody for listening today. Make sure to go subscribe wherever you listen, whether that's Spotify or Apple. Leave those 5-star reviews as well. Or if you're watching over on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Leave a like on the video. All that stuff is super appreciated by me and helps you grow the show. So without further ado, thanks again to Chandler Holt for joining us today. Thanks to all of you for listening, and enjoy the week of basketball.